the interest that we have is about psychotherapy. We are family therapists, and so the first question is what do you think about psychotherapy in itself? You know, the idea was. Our idea was the ethic of psychotherapy, but the first thing is psychotherapy ethical to you? Is an ethical enterprise?
Well, it's very difficult to say, really. The problem, well, to start with, I'm neither a psychotherapist nor an object of psychotherapy, so it's not first-hand experience, it's only my abstract ideas about the issue. But the problem with psychotherapy, like the problem with education in general, in any kind of interaction between one person and another, is the instability of the setting. And that's something which has changed very, very considerably since Sigmund Freud invented psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, when he was in a much more comfortable position than you are at the moment, because the word was given. It was not a task. It was not something very unstable, which in the course of psychotherapy, which takes sometimes several years, changes several times. So when you start, it is different, and when you finish, if you finish at all, mind you, then it is very different than it was at the start. When you read again the book, which for me, in all the legacy of Freud, is the most important one, the Civilization and its Discontent, that's where I borrow from Freud. When he wrote that, he conceived of the world out there behind the window as very stiff, very tough, and very difficult to change. In this book and in The Future of the Illusion, he, as you remember, presented the necessary prerogatives of society, of civilization. Civilization must demand things like that. You must surrender to them. And he knew what the individual man and woman should surrender to, because norms were very clear, unambiguous, and one thing for sure, everybody could safely assume that they won't change before the therapy is finished. So you have the finishing line quite clearly delineated. It won't move together with you. Now, unfortunately, there is no finishing line, there is only horizon. And as you know, when you come nearer to the horizon, it goes further away, so you'll never reach it. So that's a problem. I think that to realize really how much this version of psychotherapy has changed, one should read again Buddenbrocken by Thomas Mann. That's the description of the kind of psychological problems and behavioral problems which people used to have at the beginning of the 20th century. When Sigmund Freud wrote his Civilization and its Discontent, the problem was that you were born, say, into middle class, like Buddenbrocken were, but it didn't guarantee that you die as middle class. You had to reconstruct your social position. In this sense, we are, like Sigmund Freud and his contemporaries were, modern people, namely identity, positioning in society is not given, it is a task. And a task which you have to restart virtually every day, because your last success memory of this last success and impact of the last success wouldn't be durable, wouldn't last very long. So you have to recreate your identity all the time. All right, but the difference between the situation of Buddenbrocker and our situation is that they knew damn well what they needed to do in order to remain respectable middle class people. Right? It was all the word was the word of prescription and proscription. You could actually have a list what you must do and what you must avoid or resist doing. Nothing comparable today, really. That's the problem. Instability. Instability of norms, instability of values. You probably know Pierre Bourdieu, the great French sociologist, unfortunately not with us any longer, and he suggested that there is no such thing any longer as normative regulation. To start with, there are no norms which are supported, sustained by very powerful authorities, so both psychotherapists and the patient must submit, surrender, as if voice of God from there, and no human tinkering will be able to change it. So no such authorities are ambiguous, uncontested, as the Germans say, unfortunately, in English there is no such word, eindeutig, one meaning, no alternative, there's no ambiguity, no ambivalence. And the problem is that this ambivalence, according to Freud, just remember, are very demanding, and they demand the surrender of something. There are no free lunches, as the English say. So if you want to be secure in your society, you need to surrender part of your freedom. It may be very painful. It may be very painful because you can't follow your impulses, you can't follow your instinct, you have to impose a steel casing on your self, in a sense, to adjust it, to fit it to the shape which society, civilization determined. And Freud suggested, in fact, that all the psychological problems, why people come to psychotherapies, because of that, because of this conflict between demands of society and propulsion or inclinations dictated by their nature, by their instinct. What has changed since then? That's my hypothesis, really. I'm obsessively writing about it for more than 20 years now already, is that if Zygmunt Freud was sitting here in front of me instead of me, I guess he would repeat his major statement that between society and the individual self, the id, if you wish, there is a conflict, and being in civilized society means making a trade-off, in exchange. I get something, and in exchange I must give something. He would repeat that. That is still valid, in my view. What he, however, would change is his diagnosis of the situation. He wouldn't say, as he did in 1929, that the psychological problems of contemporary men, and presumably women as well, come from the fact that they surrender too much freedom for the sake of security. Now he would say probably that the problems of contemporary men and women come from the fact that they surrendered too much security in exchange for more freedom. So if the purpose of the therapy traditionally consisted in taming the pleasure principle, in the name of adjustment to reality principle. Now I think it is the other way around. It is the bringing some reality principle, helping reality principle to bring some order into the realm of freedom, which otherwise will be chaotic. People will be simply confused, lost, feel abandoned, and not knowing really what to do. So I would say that in this case, psychotherapy probably acts as unpaid agents of reality principle. But reality principle needs to be restored. It is not as obvious as once it was. In wooden block, and when people deviate a little bit, they are immediately punished. It comes, automatically. You don't need really any special artificial effort. It is just there, built into the setting. Nothing like that happens today. And there's no mechanism like that. And therefore, spotting the requirements of society itself becomes very difficult. Your major issue, major question which you ask about is the ethics of psychotherapy. Well, ethics presumes a certain list of commandments, right? A code, ethical code, which was pretty straightforward and clear 100 years ago, but not any longer. So I think that for every ethical commandment there is another which contradicts it, and we are living in a cacophony of suggestions. And if you take, for example, what's happened in the last 30, 40 years, when you look at the ethical code, I don't know whether it appears under this name in their thinking, but if they translate it into the art of life, into strategy of life, the know-how of how to live and so on, then if you take 3 successive generations, the boom generation, well, I precede boom generation, I'm dinosaur, so they came already, after the war. I am pre-war product. But boom generation, that's the first one. They are now, well, some of them are grandfathers already of the youngsters, and at least they are their old parents. Then you had Generation X, right, which was born already after the post-war period, in which people huddled together, remembering atrocities, the tragedy, not only of the war destruction, of the massacre, but also of pre-war unemployment, depression and hunger and whatever, right? So they were interested in having as much security as possible, right? Now, it crops up in what I'm saying, security and freedom. I think that they are both indispensable for human normal, healthy, psychological condition. Right? We need both. The problem is that they are damn difficult to reconcile, because the more security you have, the less freedom, and the more freedom you have, the less security. So it is a pendulum. It's not a not a linear progress, but rather a pendulum. In the so-called 30 glorious years immediately after the war of destruction, there was pendulum going towards more and more security. That's people who really wanted freedom from fear. Right? The Roosevelt slogan, welfare state, introduced all over Europe here. Lord Beveridge in England with his scheme of building safety net under everybody's feet so they can engage in gymnastics under the roof because they have this safety net. They know that if they fall, there will be somebody to help. Now that's the atmosphere in which the boom generation was born, into that kind of world. And they still inherited from their parents the culture of saving book. We don't have culture of saving book. We have culture of credit card now. But that saving book culture means that you have to put aside for the rainy hour or something for old age. You shouldn't spend money which you haven't earned yet. And then came the Generation X. Generation X, which people who are here between 25 years and 35, 38, and they were born already into a relatively secure world. Plenty of opportunities. The wisdom of life consists in not closing options, keep them open. Do not commit yourself prematurely to very long-term obligations, because if you do, then new opportunities will be created and you will be in no position to grasp them. And that's, a lot could be said about the kind of setting in which they grew up and to which they adjusted as the sort of a normal society. Fragmented life, living from one project to another. Meaning of the project being to secure the situation after the project when even more projects are open for choice. So fragmented life, individualized life, the responsibility mostly for myself, for my happiness. There was a period when people believed that the purpose of life is to make yourself happy. And if there is awkwardness, discomfort, not to mention pain or suffering, that's something wrong. You need compensation for that. Not written down, anyway. That should be like that. And there was a short, brief period, until quite recently, when there was the world and the human predisposition, the human perception of the world, which were winking to each other. I understand, you know what I understand, I understand what you know, this sort of thing. Mutual balance between the two. But now, I warn you, psychotherapists, that the next bunch of your patients will be Generation Y, the third generation, which was born without this cushion, without this foundation of enjoying their freedom, which they inherited from the boom generation, remembering Great Depression, saving books, delay of satisfaction, and so on. And they don't, Generation Y, who are the children of the Generation X, they don't have this basis. On the contrary, you are dealing with psychology, family psychology. The role of the parents has been reduced in recent years to people who provide pocket money for their children and enable them to start freedom of shopping very early in their life. Before they are 10, they are already shoppers and they are already experts in shopping. Parents, if they want to purchase something, they ask their children for advice. Not only when they want to operate computers, but also when they want to go to shop. And for the Y generation, at its birth, the world, which was huge container of opportunities, plus huge container of spare parts. So if something doesn't fit, throw it in the rubbish bin and buy another. That applies to things, and that applies to human beings as well, partners. If they are not fit, go away and you just replace them with your spare part available out there. It could be available in the shop, could be available in a singles bar, it could be available in the dating agency on internet, but available. So there's endless opportunities, endless choice, and it will always like that. And this white generation started with conviction that, well, if this particular job I am having now is not particularly satisfactory, there will be always another. There's no point in developing attachment, loyalty, long-term commitment, or things like that, because well, the choice is infinite, in fact. Commitment actually is harmful because it narrows the number of choices that are in front of you. If you are specializing in something, then your freedom is limited. You can't really jump elsewhere when suddenly you know that the most profitable and enjoyable jobs are completely in a different place. So with this sort of background, Generation Y entered society. But in October 2009, that's my cautious prediction, after long interruption in Britain, we will have dozens or perhaps hundreds of thousands of highly educated people unemployed. This year, when they finish the last year of their studies this year, they will look around and they will find that there is no demand for their services. So there will be tremendous shock. And I think pendulum will move in the other direction. They would probably expect from psychotherapists to give them the obligatory code, in a sense, the reality principle, which would enable them to find a ground on which to put their feet. Ground is trembling, there's no ground, they are swimming. The fashionable word for Generation X, as you know, was surfing. It's not even swimming, surfing on the surface, gliding through life. Well, they would look now, their children will have to look for islands, solid islands among these turbulent waters. So there will be great demand for ethical code. I don't know whether psychotherapists are prepared to spell out what the ethical code should be like in certain circumstances. I find it tremendously difficult. I'm working on it for 20 years. I am as wise or as stupid as I was 20 years ago. So, but it's clear that demand for that would be tremendous. You see symptoms of it around quite clearly. How people willingly surrender one by one their liberties, personal liberties, for which their great-grandfathers fought and died. They don't remember that. They give it away. We were still flying. I stopped flying, but what I was amazed, just to give one example of the airport, how people placidly, meekly accept humiliation, indignity, being sniffed all over by dogs, being subject to personal checks, which are really humiliating. And 20, 30 years ago, there would be an outcry, but now they are happy. They are happy, because we have security, personal privacy, liberty. That's not that important. That's just one example. But I think there will be, we are probably facing another change in the sphere of work ethics as well, not just the other things. Interhuman relationships. I wonder whether the frailty of human bonds, which is so prominent today, whether it will outlive the collapse of economy, the falling back into the family life as a relatively secure enclave, a shelter. Relatively, because at the moment it's not very strong. Everybody has his or her own room. The sitting room is just the room through which children, each one, pass when they return from school, and then they lock their door, and they have their personal computer in there, and iPods, and all the implements which combine into satisfactory life they have individually. Very little to be shared in the family. The sacred institution of family dinner around the table when every member sits around and they report to each other what's happened. Virtually disappeared. People are consuming fast food, and each one separately. Consumption becomes very much individual matter. And also, the culture of semi-products, half products, or fast food, or the takeaway, which puts an end to another institution which kept family together, like sharing work in the kitchen. Family was not just the unit of consumption, but unit of production. And all members consumed what they participated in producing. It all disappeared. I wonder whether it will return. I don't know. It depends how long the crisis will be, and whether they will be returned to this happy-go-lucky style of work, to which life, which was before. That's roughly my answer. I don't think that that's worthy of video, really. That's scattered thoughts.
But you don't have proposals. What we were, I don't know if you were thinking the same. I was thinking we are family therapists, but today it's difficult to say what a family is actually. So it's very difficult to define the object of therapy actually. But what I observe is that people they create families all the same, and they want intimacy all the same, and they ask us to arrive at a better intimacy. So that's a to reach a better level of intimacy. They want to stay together anyway.
Yes, well, major problems people have used to have quite not very long ago, perhaps still they do by inertia, not with tying together human relations, but with breaking them. That was the problem. It was always traumatic, it was always painful, when you live together and then you want to break it, then of course there is a lot of apologies and justifications to make, and a lot of lies to be said, and so on. It's all very, very painful. And if you probably noted, consumer markets which react to the changing situation much quicker than psychotherapists do, because they are not confined by rules of profession. They just sniff where is profit and go. They specialize actually in offering people not the best choices to enjoy, but the easiest ways of throwing them away. That was the major selling point. If you look, for example, recent event in the last 10 years or so, the single bars were people who were looking for partners in life, shy people, unlucky people, came there because they knew that everybody who is in a single bar came there with the same purpose in mind. So they can approach other people more easily than otherwise it would be. It would be easier for them to overcome their shyness. And the interesting point happened that the single bars are getting bankrupt one after another. They're closing down. Instead, you have internet dating. Internet dating, what is the advantage of it? People are running for help there, simply because what is the difference between internet dating agency and a single bar? Internet date agency has one tremendous advantage over single bar. It has this key on the keyboard, delete. So you can, it's just pushing your finger, and the most traumatic aspect of all that. Well, I made a mistake, I don't like her, she is not what I expected, or somewhere else grass is greener, so why should I stick to it? All this rigmarole is put paid to, because you stop sending SMS with messages, you stop answering them, you just, when you have a message, you just push delete, and that's the end of the story. And interesting, if you look at dating agencies, what psychotherapy should